The bride didn't say a word during the rejection, and the Korean Mafia boss pouring whiskey in that garden had no clue he'd just signed his own death warrant. Listen, what happened next would cost him everything. His mom was nervous. He could tell by the way she kept messing with her pearls, touching her hair, glancing toward the main gate like she was waiting for the Queen of England or something. Maybe she was. This arranged marriage had been his grandfather's dying wish. Literally. The old man had maybe 3 months left, 6 if the doctors were being super optimistic, and he'd spent the last 2 weeks setting up this meeting with a family Sai-woo had never even heard of.
Which family is she from?
Sai-woo had asked 3 days earlier. His grandfather just smiled that knowing smile that made Sai-woo feel like he was 12 years old again. You'll see. That was it. No details, no background. Just instructions to show up at the estate garden at 2 p.m. on Sunday and keep an open mind. Sai-woo didn't like surprises. The car pulled up at 2:07, a black sedan, nice but not armored. No escort vehicles, no security anywhere in sight. Sai-woo's first red flag, though at the time he thought it just proved what he'd suspected all along. His grandfather was getting old, making sentimental mistakes, probably trying to help out some distant family friend's daughter who needed a come-up. The driver opened the back door, and Tammy Wilkes stepped out. Si-woo sized her up before her second foot even touched the gravel. She wore that cream-colored dress. Simple, elegant, the kind that screams money if you know how to look, but Si-woo wasn't looking. He was busy cataloging everything that was missing. No visible jewelry except tiny gold earrings, no designer bag, no family members or bodyguards positioning themselves around the garden like chess pieces. She walked toward them completely alone. But her posture? Perfect. Shoulders back, chin up, spine straight as a ruler. Her heels clicked against the stone path in this steady, confident rhythm. Her face was stunning. The kind of beautiful that makes people do double takes on the street, but her expression gave away absolutely nothing. Calm, controlled, the kind of calm that comes from somewhere deep. Sai-woo's mom stepped forward first, already putting on that polite smile. His grandfather stood beside the car with his hands folded, just watching. Not greeting her, not saying anything, just watching. And this is the part that really gets me. Si-woo didn't even wait for introductions. He set his glass down on the stone wall around the koi pond and crossed that garden in like 8 long strides. His mom's smile completely disappeared. His grandfather's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Something that looked a whole lot like resignation. Sai-woo stopped about 3 feet from Tammy Wilkes and looked at her the way you'd look at a business proposal you're already planning to reject.
I don't know what charity case my grandfather felt obligated to help,
he said, his voice carrying across the whole garden.
But I'm not marrying someone who got brought in from poverty just to elevate her status.
The words hit like bombs. One of the servers literally stopped pouring champagne mid-pour. The traffic noise from the street suddenly seemed way too loud. Even the koi fish stopped moving. Tammy didn't react. She didn't gasp or step back or let her face crack into hurt or shock or anger. She just stood there, 2 feet away from Sai-woo, and looked at him with these dark eyes that seemed to see straight through his expensive suit and Italian leather shoes, and all that inherited arrogance. 5 seconds. That's how long she held his gaze. 5 seconds where the air between them felt heavy, like that split second right before lightning strikes. 5 seconds where Si-woo felt something he couldn't quite name. Not fear, not exactly, but something close to it. Then she turned around. No words, no defense. No tears or protests or attempts to salvage the situation. Just this smooth pivot on her heel and a walk back to the car. Her pace was unhurried. her posture still perfect. Siwoo's mom grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. Her nails dug into his forearm through the fabric of his jacket. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Her voice was shaking.
I avoided a mistake.
Siwoo said, already heading back to his whiskey.
Grandfather's getting sentimental in his old age. She wasn't even from a family we know.
He glanced at his grandfather, expecting anger or at least disappointment he could argue against. But the old man had closed his eyes. Not in anger. In pain. The kind of pain that comes from watching someone you love absolutely destroy themselves and knowing there's nothing you can do to stop it. That should have been Siwoo's second red flag. But he was too busy pouring himself another drink. The car door closed with this soft click that somehow sounded too final. The engine purred to life. Tammy's sedan rolled down that long driveway, past the iron gates with the family crest worked into the metal, and disappeared into Seoul traffic. Inside that car, Tammy sat in the back seat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her expression still hadn't changed. She looked like someone who'd just finished a routine doctor's appointment, but not someone who'd been publicly humiliated by a man who'd judged her entire worth in 3 seconds flat. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number she'd memorized but never saved. The call connected on the first ring. "He failed the test," Tammy said, her voice quiet and steady. "Proceed with contingency plan." She ended the call, slipped the phone back in her purse, and looked out the window at Seoul passing by in this blur of glass and steel and neon lights. Her expression still hadn't changed, but if you looked real close, really close, you might have caught the corner of her mouth twitch. Not a smile, something way colder. Now here's the thing most people don't get about power in the criminal underworld, and honestly, in any high-stakes situation, it's not about who looks the most dangerous. It's about who controls the information. See, Siwoo made a mistake that literally gets people killed every single day. He judged power by how it looked on the surface. The gold chains, the armed escorts, those loud, flashy displays of wealth. That's what amateurs do. That's what people who inherit power do because they've never actually had to earn it. But real power, the kind that actually lasts, that's built on 3 things. Strategic intelligence, knowing your enemy's operations better than they know them themselves. Tammy spent years learning Siwoo's entire network. She didn't just attack him randomly, she knew exactly where to cut so the whole system would collapse like a house of cards. Loyalty through respect, not fear. Siwoo's men followed him because they were scared out of their minds. Tammy's soldiers followed her because she'd earned their respect through tactical brilliance and leading from the front lines. That's the difference between an empire that crumbles at the first sign of weakness and one that holds solid under pressure. The ability to think 10 moves ahead. This is where military-level strategic training separates the amateurs from the pros. Tactical leaders react to what's right in front of them. Strategic leaders shape the entire battlefield before the fight even starts. Tammy didn't just plan Siwoo's downfall, she planned for every single response he could possibly make, including the contingency that led to his capture. And that's the real lesson here. In any power structure, whether we're talking organized crime, corporate leadership, or even family dynamics, the person who controls the information, ethics earns genuine loyalty and thinks strategically will always outlast the person relying on appearances and inherited authority. Siwoo learned that the hard way. Now, I gotta be real with you for a second. If you've made it this far in the story, you're clearly someone who appreciates depth. Someone who doesn't just want surface-level entertainment. You want stories that actually teach you something. Stories that make you think about power, strategy, and what happens when you underestimate people. And that's exactly what this channel's all about. But here's the thing. Creating content like this, stories with layered characters, strategic depth, real-world lessons woven into the narrative, takes hours of research, writing, and production. And the only way I can keep cranking out these kinds of stories is if people like you actually engage with them. So if you found value in this, if you learned something about power dynamics, strategic thinking, or just enjoyed watching Saiwoo's arrogance get absolutely dismantled piece by piece, do me one solid. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for yourself. Because every single week I'm dropping stories like this that'll entertain you and teach you something most people never learn. And honestly, if you don't subscribe, you're gonna miss the next one, and the one after that. And you'll never know how Tammy and Saiwoo's story actually ends. 3 months passed. Siwoo forgot about Tammy Wilkes the same way you forget about last season's weather. His grandfather died 2 weeks after that garden incident, and Saiwoo spent the whole funeral accepting condolences from people who looked at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or pity. He chose to see it as respect. His empire was expanding. New routes into Busan, a weapons deal with this Russian supplier that would literally triple his firepower. A property grab in Gangnam that gave him leverage over 3 rival operations. His men feared him. His enemies respected him. His name carried weight in rooms where most people would get shot just for breathing the wrong way. By November, Saiwoo felt completely untouchable. That's what he was thinking at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when his phone started blowing up. The first call came from his warehouse manager in Incheon, then his lieutenant in Busan, then his security chief in Gangnam. Then 12 more calls in about 90 seconds, each voice more panicked than the last. We're under attack. They knew exactly where to hit. Communications are down. Sir, we're getting slaughtered out here. Siwoo stood in his penthouse in silk pajama pants and no shirt, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. His mind was racing through possibilities. Rival families? Unlikely. None of them had the coordination for simultaneous hits across 4 different cities. Police raid? Nah, his contacts would have warned him. Internal coup? His men were way too scared to even think about betrayal. By 3:40 a.m., 4 warehouses were literally burning. By 4:15 a.m., 12 of his top lieutenants were either dead or missing. By 4:30 a.m., his entire Incheon operation had gone completely dark. Someone wasn't just attacking his empire, they were erasing it. And trust me, this gets worse.
Get everyone to the Gangnam location.
Saiwoo barked into his phone, his voice tight with barely controlled fury.
Emergency meeting, now.
The Gangnam warehouse was a secret his grandfather had kept for like 30 years. A location only the inner circle knew about, purchased under some shell company buried under 6 layers of legal paperwork. If anywhere was safe, it was there. Saiwoo rolled up at 4:52 a.m. with 8 of his remaining guys. They pulled into the underground parking garage, engines echoing off concrete walls, headlights slicing through shadows. That's when Saiwoo realized he'd just made his final mistake. The flash grenade went off before his car door even opened, blinding white light, this concussive force that turned his thoughts to complete static. Hands grabbed him, too many hands too strong, moving way too coordinated. These weren't street thugs or rival gangsters. These were soldiers. Siwoo fought back anyway. He always fought. His fist connected with someone's jaw. His elbow found ribs. But there were like 10 of them, maybe more, and they moved like they'd been training together for years. 90 seconds. That's how long it took them to hood him, zip-tie his wrists, and throw him in the back of a van. The van drove for 23 minutes. East, then south, then east again. Saiwoo counted every single turn, trying to map the route in his head the way his grandfather had taught him. toward the industrial district near the Han River, the kind of area where screams don't carry and bodies just disappear into concrete foundations. When the van finally stopped, rough hands yanked him out. His knees slammed into concrete hard enough to make him bite his tongue. Blood filled his mouth. The zip ties were cutting into his wrists, sending these sharp pains shooting up his forearms. He heard footsteps, dozens of them, boots on concrete, the metallic click of rifles being checked, low voices speaking Korean, Mandarin, something else he couldn't identify. Then this silence so complete it made his ears ring. Someone ripped the hood off. Siwoo blinked against industrial lighting so harsh it literally felt like violence. His eyes adjusted slowly, shapes forming out of that brightness. He was kneeling in the center of this massive warehouse, empty except for support columns and shadows, cold enough that he could see his own breath, and soldiers, 200 of them, maybe more, all decked out in black tactical gear, faces covered by masks. Rifles held at parade rest in this perfect formation. The rows were so straight, they looked like someone had drawn them with a ruler. And every single one of them was facing her. Tammy Wilkes stood about 20 feet from Siwoo, wearing the exact same cream-colored dress she'd worn 3 months ago in his family's garden. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her posture was still perfect. Her expression was still calm. And when she looked at Siwoo kneeling on that concrete, her eyes held the same unreadable darkness they'd held the day he rejected her. Siwoo's brain literally couldn't process it. This woman, this complete nobody he'd dismissed as a charity case, was standing at the center of an army that had just destroyed his entire operation in one night.
Who are you?
The words came out hoarse, desperate, nothing like that confident dismissal he'd delivered 3 months ago. Tammy took 3 steps forward. Her heels echoed in the silence. She stopped about 5 feet from him and tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before making that first cut. She raised one hand. A soldier immediately stepped forward and placed this leather folder in her palm. She opened it slowly, deliberately, and held it so Siwoo could see. Deeds, contracts, intelligence files, photographs of his warehouses, his supply routes, his safe houses, financial records showing every single transaction he'd made over the last 2 years, names of his allies, locations of his remaining operations, everything. "You said I was a charity case brought from poverty," Tammy said. Her voice quiet and controlled, and so cold it made the warehouse feel like 10 degrees colder. "You assumed I was powerless because I didn't show up with gold chains and armed escorts." She closed the folder and handed it back to the soldier without even looking at him. "You were wrong about everything." Siwoo's mouth had gone completely dry. His mind was racing, scrambling for an angle, some kind of play, some way to regain control. "My grandfather, did he know?" And this is the part that really gets me. Tammy's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Not sadness, exactly, more like recognition, like she'd been waiting for that exact question. "Your grandfather set up our meeting as a test," she said. "He knew exactly who I am. So did my adoptive father before he died. Mo, if you'd shown even basic respect, if you'd looked past surface appearances and actually recognized value when it was standing right in front of you, our families would have united peacefully." She gestured, and another soldier stepped forward with a different folder. This one looked older, the leather worn at the edges. "I'm Tammy Cheong's adopted daughter," she continued, and Siwoo's blood literally turned to ice at that name. Raised from age 12 as his successor, military trained, educated in 7 languages, tactical operations, political strategy, and organizational psychology. Your grandfather and my father designed this arranged marriage as a way to merge our syndicates and end 30 years of territorial conflict. Pay attention to this part. But they built in a contingency, Tammy said, her voice dropping even lower. If you proved yourself unworthy, if your arrogance completely blinded you to reality, then I'd absorb your organization by force instead. She opened that second folder. Siwoo saw his grandfather's handwriting, his actual signature, legal documents transferring assets, and at the very bottom, a handwritten note. You inherited my name, Siwoo, but I gave my legacy to someone who earned it. The whole warehouse started spinning. Siwoo's grandfather hadn't just set up a test. He'd arranged Siwoo's complete and total annihilation if he failed it. Half of your organization legally belongs to me, Tammy said, snapping the folder shut. Transferred automatically the second you rejected me. The other half, I've taken by force over the last 3 months. Your allies have switched sides. Your operations are completely surrounded. Your men are either dead or captured. She looked down at Siwoo kneeling on that concrete, and for the first time he saw something in her expression that wasn't just cold calculation. It was disappointment. You had everything, she said quietly, and you destroyed it all because you couldn't see past a simple dress and modest jewelry. She raised her hand again. Soldiers moved, rifles coming up from parade rest to ready position. 2 guys stepped forward and forced Siwoo's head down, exposing the back of his neck. This was it. Execution time. Siwoo's mind raced through his entire life in seconds. Every decision, every arrogant assumption, every single moment he'd mistaken inherited power for earned respect. And he realized Tammy was right about absolutely everything. Wait! The word came out desperate. Broken. Nothing like the man who dismissed her 3 months ago. Tammy's hand was still raised. The soldiers were still in position, but she paused.
I have information,
Siwoo said, words tumbling out in this rush.
About the syndicate that killed your father.
That got her attention. Tammy's hand lowered slightly. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, laser-focused on Siwoo with this intensity that made his skin crawl.
The third-party operation. The ones who hit your convoy 2 years ago.
Siwoo continued, desperation making him reckless.
They're planning to eliminate both our organizations while you're focused on me. I've got intelligence, locations, movement schedules, proof.
The warehouse got so quiet, Siwoo could literally hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Tammy studied him for exactly 5 seconds. Then her hand made this single gesture, sharp, decisive. The soldiers stepped back, the rifles lowered. Prove it, Tammy said. Siwoo's breath came out in this rush.
The Zhao family out of Beijing. They've been positioning assets in Seoul for 6 months. They killed your father because he was the only one strong enough to stop their expansion into Korea. Now they're just waiting for you to finish me off so they can hit you while you're completely exposed.
Tammy turned to this guy standing to her right. Older dude, military bearing, the kind of face that's seen like 30 years of combat. Her intelligence officer, Siwoo, figured. The man pulled out a tablet, his fingers moving quick across the screen. 30 seconds passed, then a full minute. Finally, he looked up at Tammy and nodded once. The intelligence matches our preliminary reports, he said in Korean. The threat's legit. Tammy looked back at Siwoo. Her expression hadn't softened at all, but something had shifted. She was running calculations in her head, weighing options, making decisions that would determine whether Siwoo lived or died in the next 60 seconds. You've got 1 week to prove your value, she finally said. If your intelligence leads us to the Zhao operation, you'll stay alive as long as you remain useful. If you're lying. Or if your information turns out to be worthless. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Two soldiers grabbed Saiwoo's arms and hauled him to his feet. Oh, his legs barely held him up. They started dragging him toward this side door, and as Saiwoo looked back over his shoulder, he saw Tammy standing in the center of that warehouse, surrounded by her entire army. And for the first time in his life, Kwon Siwoo understood what real power actually looked like. It wasn't inherited wealth or expensive suits or a famous family name. It was a woman in a cream dress who'd spent 3 months systematically dismantling an empire because someone underestimated her. The facility where they kept Siwoo was nothing like a prison. It was clean, temperature-controlled, had a bed that didn't creak. Get 3 meals a day that actually tasted like real food. But the door locked from the outside, and 2 armed guards stood in the hallway 24/7, so Saiwoo understood exactly what he was. A valuable asset, not a guest. Tammy came every single day at exactly 9 a.m. She called them interrogations, but Siwoo recognized them for what they really were, strategy sessions. She'd show up with her intelligence officer and 2 guards, carrying tablets and satellite maps and intercept reports. And for the next 3 hours, they'd dissect the Zhao family's operation piece by piece.
Their main staging areas in Incheon,
Siwoo said on day 3, pointing to a spot on the map spread across the table.
They've been using a shipping company as cover, Huang Logistics. Containers arrive from Beijing every Tuesday and Thursday.
Tammy studied the map, her finger tracing routes Saiwoo couldn't see. If they're staging in Incheon, they'll need local distribution, she said, more to herself than to him. Secondary locations in Bushin and Ansan for weapons storage, probably using the industrial corridors to avoid highway checkpoints. She looked up at her intelligence officer. Run analysis on commercial properties purchased in those areas over the last 8 months. Cross-reference with shell companies tied to Beijing financial networks. The officer nodded and left. And I'm not even kidding. Siwoo watched her work and felt something actually crack inside his chest. This wasn't luck or inherited position. This was pure mastery. Tammy wasn't just competent, she was operating on a level Saiwoo had spent his entire life pretending to reach. By the end of week 1, Siwoo had provided enough intelligence to map the Zhao family's entire Korean operation. By the end of week 2, Tammy had built countermeasures for scenarios Siwoo hadn't even considered. On day 9, she revealed something that made Saiwoo understand exactly how outmatched he'd always been. I speak 7 languages, Tammy said casually, reviewing this intercept report in Mandarin before switching to Korean. Mandarin, Korean, Japanese, English, Russian, Arabic, and French. My father started my training when I was 12. Military tactics, political manipulation, organizational psychology. He brought in instructors from 5 different countries. She looked up at Siwoo, and her eyes were completely steady. You assumed I was poor because I wore a simple dress. I was actually demonstrating something you never learned. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. That's a red flag, I don't care what anyone says, because Saiwoo had spent his entire life doing exactly the opposite, announcing his power through expensive suits and intimidation and flashy displays of wealth that meant absolutely nothing when someone with actual competence decided to take it all away.
I want to apologize.
Siwoo started. I don't need your regret, Tammy cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. I need your network, your contacts, your intelligence. If you want to survive this, prove you're more valuable alive than dead. So Saiwoo did. By week 3, they'd given him some limited freedom. Supervised phone calls to his remaining contacts. Monitored computer access to coordinate intelligence gathering. Saiwoo used every resource he had left to map out the Zhao operation, and in return, He got to watch Tammy's organization from the inside. And this is the part that really gets me. Her soldiers respected her. Not that fake kind of respect Siwoo's men had shown him, fear dressed up as loyalty, obedience maintained through violence and threats. Real respect. The kind you earn by leading from the front lines and proving yourself worthy over and over and over until people follow you because they genuinely want to, not because they're terrified of what happens if they don't. Siwoo watched her walk into a command room packed with hardened criminals and ex-military operators, and every single one of them straightened up and gave her their complete attention. Not because she threatened them, because she'd earned it. She ran her organization completely opposite to his. Merit over birthright. Actual competence over who you knew. Respect over intimidation. Listen. Siwoo's remaining lieutenant, this guy named Kang who'd served his family for 15 years, managed to make contact on day 22. The call was brief, encrypted, desperate. "We can get you out," Kang whispered. "Oh, I still got 6 guys loyal to your family. We hit them during a supply transfer next week, extract you, disappear into—" "No." The word came out before Siwoo even thought about it. Kang went silent on the other end. "Sir?"
She's right.
Siwoo said, and saying it out loud made it real.
About everything. I destroyed our family's legacy through pure arrogance. If I run now, I'm just proving I didn't learn anything.
"They're gonna kill you eventually,"
Maybe.
Siwoo interrupted.
But if I betray her now, I deserve it.
He ended the call and just stared at his hands. They were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from this realization that he'd just chosen Tammy's judgment over his own survival instinct. That was the exact moment Siwoo understood he'd fundamentally changed. 3 days later, right in the middle of a strategy session, the whole facility shook. Explosion. Close, real close. Smoke alarms started screaming. Tammy's expression didn't change, but her hand went immediately to the radio on her belt. Report," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos erupting all around them. Third-party assault on the east wing," a voice crackled back. "They breached the perimeter with explosives. We're looking at least 30 hostiles." The radio cut to static. Tammy turned to Siwoo, and for the first time in 3 weeks, he saw this calculation in her eyes that involved him as more than just an intelligence source. "Your Zhao contacts," she said quickly. "They'd know our shift rotation schedules. Where would they position snipers for maximum coverage during an evacuation?" Siwoo's mind raced, pulling up memories of conversations, patterns, tactical preferences.
Rooftops, north side. They favor high ground with multiple exit routes. If they're using the standard Beijing tactical manual, they'll have overwatch positions covering the main entrance and all the vehicle access points.
Tammy's eyes sharpened. She grabbed her radio. "All units, this is command. Redirect evacuation through south corridors. I want counter-sniper teams on northern rooftops immediately. Target buildings marked Echo 7 and Echo 9. 30 seconds later, her radio crackled again. "Confirmed hostile snipers on Echo 7 and Echo 9. Engaging now." Tammy looked at Siwoo. The explosion, the chaos, the gunfire echoing through the facility. And for the first time, something cracked in that controlled expression of hers. Not quite a smile, but recognition. Like she was seeing him as something other than that arrogant guy who'd rejected her in a garden 3 months ago. "Good call," she said quietly. Siwoo's chest felt tight. Those 2 words meant more than any praise he'd gotten in his entire life. The intel came through on day 28. The Zhao family was planning this major operation. Simultaneous strikes designed to eliminate both Tammy's and Siwoo's remaining forces in one brutal night. 70 operators, military-grade weapons, insider intelligence that suggested they'd been planning this thing for months. "We gotta hit them first," Tammy said during the emergency strategy meeting. Her command room was packed, 30 of her best soldiers, her intelligence officers, and Saiwu sitting at the edge of the table like he wasn't totally sure he belonged there. "Joint operation," her head of tactical operations said. "Combined forces. We use Saiwu's remaining guys to flank from the south, while our main assault hits from the east." The room went dead quiet. Several of Tammy's soldiers looked straight up uncomfortable. Siwu's 3 remaining lieutenants, guys who'd barely survived the last 3 months, looked like they'd rather chew glass than work alongside the woman who'd destroyed their entire empire. Tammy stood up. The room's attention shifted to her immediately. "I get the hesitation," she said, her voice carrying that quiet authority that somehow made people lean in to hear better. "But the Zhao family wants us divided. They're literally counting on old grudges and pride to keep us from working together. If we let that happen, we all die." She looked directly at Saiwu. "This cooperation isn't weakness, it's strategic necessity. If you've ever been in a situation like this, you'll understand." Because Saiwu felt the weight of 33 hostile stares pressing against him from every single direction. Guys who'd lost friends, who'd watched their operations burn to the ground, who blamed him for leading them into a war they were losing badly, and he had to prove, to them and to himself, that he'd actually changed. The planning session lasted 6 hours. By the end, they had a workable strategy. Risky as hell, completely dependent on timing and trust that neither side fully had yet, but workable. As the room cleared out, Saiwu found himself alone with Tammy. She was studying satellite imagery of the Zhao stronghold, her finger tracing entry points and potential kill zones. "Why'd you really agree to the arranged marriage?" Siwu asked quietly. The question had been building in him for weeks. "You didn't need my family. You could have taken everything by force from the jump." Tammy's hand stopped moving. She didn't look up, but her shoulders tensed slightly. "My father's dying wish," she said after this long pause, "was that I find someone worthy to lead beside me, not someone to control me or be controlled by me, an equal." She finally looked up, and Siwu saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Vulnerability. The carefully constructed weapon showing the actual human underneath. "I hoped you might be that person," she continued, her voice softer now. "I hoped you'd see past surface appearances and recognize value when it was standing right in front of you. Pay attention to this part. Instead, you proved exactly why my father built in that contingency plan," Tammy said. "He knew there was a risk you'd fail. He just really hoped you wouldn't." Siwu felt something twist in his chest. Not just regret, something way deeper, understanding. This woman standing in front of him wasn't just a weapon or some tactical genius or the heir to a criminal empire. She was human, and she'd been hoping for partnership, just like he'd been trying to avoid a trap. They'd both been wrong about everything. The operation kicked off at 2 a.m. on a moonless Thursday. 200 combined forces, Tammy's soldiers and Saiwu's remaining guys working together for literally the first time in 30 years of territorial conflict. The Zhao stronghold was this converted factory complex in the industrial district, 5 buildings connected by underground tunnels and surrounded by chain-link fence and watchtowers. Siwu led the southern flank with his 3 lieutenants and 40 of Tammy's soldiers. Tammy commanded the main assault from the east with her core tactical team. The plan was simple: simultaneous breach, overwhelm their defenses through superior numbers and coordination, neutralize their leadership before they could scatter and disappear. Simple plans never survive contact with reality. They breached at 2:17 a.m. The south entrance blew open exactly on schedule. Siwoo's team poured through the gap, weapons up, moving in this practiced formation through smoke and complete darkness. That's when the ambush hit. The Zhao family had known they were coming. Somehow. They'd reinforced their numbers, repositioned their defenses, and turned the entire south corridor into this perfect killing funnel. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Siwoo's team scattered, taking cover behind machinery and concrete pillars. 2 of his guys went down in the first 30 seconds, then 4 more. The radios were filled with screaming and static. "Fall back!" one of his lieutenants shouted, blood literally running down his face from a nasty head wound. "Sir, we gotta retreat!" "Where's Tammy's position?" Siwoo demanded, pressed flat against a concrete pillar while bullets just chewed through the air around him. "East wing, maybe 3 blocks." His lieutenant's voice got drowned out by this explosion that shook the entire building. Through all the smoke and chaos, Siwoo heard Tammy's voice on the radio. Calm, controlled. "East team is pinned down. Heavy casualties. We need support." The radio cut out. Siwoo's lieutenant grabbed his arm hard. "This is our chance," he hissed, his eyes going wild. "We fall back right now. Let her forces take the hit, and we disappear. You can rebuild." And this is where things got ugly. Because Siwoo realized he had a choice. He could save himself, retreat, let Tammy's forces get sacrificed while he escaped to fight another day. It's exactly what he would have done 3 months ago. It's what the old Siwoo, that arrogant heir who judged people by their jewelry and dismissed value he didn't recognize, would have done without a second thought. Or he could prove he'd actually changed. "No," Siwoo said, and his voice was steady despite all the chaos. "We go east. We reach Tammy's position." "That's straight-up suicide." "Then we die proving we're better than we were." Siwoo cut him off. He looked at his remaining guys, 7 of them, bloody and scared and staring at him like he'd completely lost his mind. "She gave us a chance when she should have killed us. Now we prove we actually deserved it." He didn't wait for them to agree. He just moved. Siwoo broke from cover and ran straight toward the east wing, firing as he went. His men followed, not because they had to, but because something in Siwoo's voice had fundamentally changed. He wasn't barking orders like some heir demanding obedience. He was leading like a soldier choosing sacrifice. They fought through 3 corridors of absolute hell, bullets, explosions, hand-to-hand combat when the guns ran dry. Siwoo took a round through his left shoulder, then another one through his side. His lieutenant went down, then another of his guys. But they kept moving. They reached Tammy's position at 2:34 a.m., 17 minutes that felt like 17 hours. Her flank was completely collapsing. Zhao operators were pushing through from 2 directions, and Tammy's team was pinned behind overturned equipment and concrete barriers. Siwoo spotted her immediately, still calm, still controlled, directing her soldiers with hand signals while bullets just tore through the air all around her. And he saw the Zhao sniper lining up the shot from this elevated position she couldn't see. Siwoo didn't think. He just moved. He threw himself in front of Tammy right as the sniper fired. The first bullet hit his chest, the second his shoulder. The third would have hit his head if his legs hadn't completely given out, dropping him hard to the concrete. The world turned sideways. Sound became distant and muffled. Siwoo saw Tammy's face above him, shocked. For the first time, genuinely shocked. And then her expression hardened into something absolutely terrifying. She stood up straight into the gunfire and started giving orders in this voice like hammered steel. Her soldiers responded instantly, executing movements Siwoo's fading consciousness couldn't even track. Counter-assault, flanking maneuvers, pure tactical brilliance that turned their collapsing position into this devastating counterattack. The gunfire got super intense for about 90 seconds. Then it just stopped. Saiwu heard boots on concrete, Zhao operators screaming, the sound of tactical teams clearing rooms, and Tammy's voice on the radio, calm again. All hostiles neutralized. Secure the perimeter. I need medical to the East Wing immediately. Saiwu tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. His vision was going dark around the edges. He felt hands on him, medics maybe, moving way too fast and too urgently for him to track. But the last thing he saw before darkness completely took him was Tammy's face. Her hand was pressed against his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Her eyes were wide. Her lips were moving, saying something Saiwu couldn't hear. For the first time since he'd met her, Tammy Wilkes looked genuinely afraid. Saiwu woke up 3 days later in this medical facility that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Every part of his body hurt. That sharp, deep pain that meant surgeons had done some serious work keeping him alive. Tammy was sitting in a chair right beside his bed, not standing in the doorway surrounded by guards, not watching from across the room, sitting right beside his bed like she'd been there for hours. When Siwoo's eyes opened, her shoulders sagged slightly with relief before she caught herself and straightened back up. "You're awake," she said quietly. "The doctors said you'd probably make it, but—" She didn't finish. "How long?" A Saiwu's voice came out as this rasp. 3 days. You took 3 bullets. 1 collapsed your lung. The surgeon said another 2 centimeters and you would have bled out before we could even get you stabilized. Saiwu tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain just exploded through his chest. Tammy's hand shot out, steadying him, helping him ease back against the pillows. "Your organization's fully absorbed now," she continued, her voice back to that controlled tone. "What was left after the Zhao operation got integrated into mine? Your guys chose to stay, most of them anyway." "So you're gonna kill me once I'm healed," Siwu said. Not a question, just acceptance. Tammy looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out this folded piece of paper. Old. The creases were worn soft from being opened and closed so many times. "This is my father's final letter to me," she said, unfolding it real carefully. Written 2 weeks before he died. She held it so Saiwu could see the handwriting, elegant Korean characters written by a shaking hand. "Find someone who chooses you over themselves," Tammy read out loud. "Not because they have to, not because of some arrangement or obligation, but because when it actually matters, when their life is on the line, they prove through action that you're worth dying for." She refolded the letter and looked at Siwu with this expression he couldn't quite read. "You proved it," she said simply. "You could have retreated, saved yourself. Just let my forces get sacrificed while you escaped. Instead, you chose sacrifice. You proved genuine transformation, not through words, but through action." Siwoo's chest felt tight, and it wasn't from the bullet wounds. "I'm offering you a partnership," Tammy continued. "Not the arranged marriage your grandfather set up, not some obligation or alliance born from desperation. A choice, joint leadership of our combined organization built on mutual respect and proven trust." "I don't deserve this," Siwu said, and he meant every word. Tammy's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "You didn't," she agreed, "but you earned it." 8 weeks later, Saiwu stood in a warehouse that had been converted into a command center. 200 soldiers stood in formation. Tammy's people and his people. No longer divided by old territorial grudges, but united under combined leadership. Tammy stood right beside him. Not behind him, not in front of him. Beside him. Equals. They'd spent the last 2 months restructuring the entire operation, dismantling those fear-based hierarchies Saiwoo's family had built over decades, implementing merit-based promotion systems, training programs, strategic planning that emphasized long-term stability over short-term territorial expansion. It was working, better than Saiwoo had ever imagined possible. As they addressed their combined forces, explaining the next phase of operations and organizational changes, Saiwoo felt Tammy's eyes on him. He glanced over, and for the first time since he'd met her in his family's garden 5 months ago, Tammy Wilkes allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Not the controlled expression of a weapon, not the calculated look of some tactician, just human. And Saiwoo understood something his grandfather had tried to teach him his entire life. Real power isn't inherited. It isn't displayed through expensive suits or gold chains or intimidation tactics. Real power gets earned through action, through recognizing value in others, through humility and sacrifice, and the willingness to admit when you're catastrophically wrong about something. It took losing absolutely everything for Saiwoo to learn that lesson, but standing beside Tammy, leading together as equals, he finally understood it was worth it. The lesson. Let me break down something most people never learn until it's way too late. In any hierarchy, whether we're talking organized crime, corporate leadership, family dynamics, or even personal relationships, there are 3 fundamental principles that separate people who build lasting power from those who just watch their empires crumble. First, strategic intelligence beats inherited authority every single time. Saiwoo spent his whole life relying on his family name, and it took exactly 3 months for him to lose everything when someone with actual strategic capability decided to take it. Tammy didn't beat him through violence. She beat him through information. She knew his operations better than he did. She understood his weaknesses before he even recognized he had them. That's not luck. That's years of disciplined intelligence gathering and strategic planning. Second, loyalty built on respect will always outlast loyalty built on fear. Saiwoo's guys followed him because they were scared out of their minds of what would happen if they didn't. The second he showed weakness, they scattered like roaches. Tammy's soldiers followed her into literal gunfire because she'd earned their respect by leading from the front and proving her competence over and over. That's the difference between a house of cards and a foundation of solid stone. Third, real transformation gets proven through sacrifice, not words. Saiwoo could have apologized 1,000 times, and Tammy wouldn't have cared at all. Words are cheap as dirt. But when he chose to risk his life to save hers, when he proved through action that he'd fundamentally changed, that's when she recognized genuine transformation. In high-stakes situations, people judge you by what you do when everything's on the line, not by what you say when it's convenient. The most valuable skill you can possibly develop, whether you're building a business, leading a team, or navigating complex relationships, is the ability to recognize value in others regardless of how it's packaged. Saiwoo judged Tammy by her dress and dismissed her as completely powerless. That single moment of arrogance cost him his entire empire. Don't be like Saiwoo at the beginning of this story. Be like Saiwoo at the end. If this story taught you something, if you recognized yourself in Saiwoo's arrogance or understood the power of Tammy's strategic thinking, then I need you to do 3 things right now. Hit that like button. Not just because it helps the algorithm, but because it tells me you actually value content that teaches you something real instead of just entertaining you for 5 minutes before you scroll to the next thing. Subscribe to this channel, because every single week I'm dropping stories like this. Narratives that combine thrilling plots with real-world lessons about power, strategy, human psychology, and the mistakes that literally get people destroyed. If you don't subscribe, you're going to miss the next story, and the one after that, and you'll never know which lesson might have actually changed your life. And drop a comment telling me what you learned from Saiwoo and Tammy's story. Did you recognize yourself in Saiwoo's initial arrogance? Have you ever underestimated someone just because of surface appearances? Oh, have you had to completely transform yourself after realizing you were catastrophically wrong about something? Share your story, because the comment section is where we build a community of people who don't just consume content, they learn from it and apply it to their own lives. Don't just watch this story and bounce. Take the lesson, subscribe, and let me know what hit you hardest. I'll see you in the next one.